Hi, my name is Alla Abdunabi. I'm a Libyan artist living in Dubai. I really think about fact and fiction in my work and playing between those two. In talking about these kind of like micro histories that are relevant to my own lineage and my own family's history, but also can become kind of universal and talk about the global north and the global south and the interactions between the two through an object, through the movement of an object, and through the way that something can be valued or devalued when it moves across borders. I try to employ these different techniques of extraction and control and replication that often we see in these colonial objects. And then how can I take those processes and reshape the narrative through the use of these ways of making? So I become both the caretaker and aggressor, and I think there's such an interesting relationship between care and aggression. And often, specifically with kind of Western intervention, they seem to be very tightly kind of intertwined, and one is used in order to gain some sort of power. And so I'm interested in employing those techniques and kind of taking control again over this narrative. And that's really what my work is about. Growing up, I would play a lot, and I think that continues into my practice today. My relationship with space and land and material has always been kind of a very bodily, very tactile experience. And so for me, I think I've always been interested in looking at these micro-histories because of these conversations that I would have with family, where we would kind of sit around and have some tea and talk about all these histories of my land and by extension of my people. And I think I became really interested now in my practice, and especially when I grew older, in kind of going down these rabbit holes and finding these stories and thinking about ways that I can tell it and speak directly to an audience through an object. Carving a space or creating a work where the viewer can see themselves is quite important. That reflection of seeing yourself represented, but also questioning and reflecting, you know, your own body and your own practices and your own rituals and your own histories is also super important to me. But I was also interested in this kind of idea of the object changing and withering away over time. And once again, in an effort to kind of domesticize or bring these monuments and objects and ruins into the domestic space, I use these domestic materials, and so I carve replicas of these pieces out of soap. So they're these kind of large soap sculptures that I then, on the opening day, place into a tub of water. And so for the duration of the show, they begin to kind of melt and wither, and you see the residue of the soap in the water. And then post, you know, that exhibition closing, it then moved to different art spaces, but in the public area of those spaces, and we kind of hid them, you know, within corners of these little public spaces, public art spaces. And so then you're confronted with this history of displacement, of assimilation, of all these things that are so familiar, and you're confronted with it in this public space. So once again, I'm thinking about kind of eliciting these certain responses and thinking about yourself through this object. So yeah, it became kind of this durational piece. So I would say that body of work, along with the text pieces or the images that I had displayed that were from the Royal Collection, the British Royal Collection, where there were all these images of the Leptis Magna folly that were in the gardens, that I had then kind of digitally removed and extracted and then displayed. And so you see kind of just the silhouette of those pieces. That body of work together really is when I understood what my practice was. In this show, I first had interacted with the story that I'm focusing on, which is the kind of larger story of the Barbary lion. It was when I had found North African postcards in Venice. And they're actually here, where I found these images, and this one particular one was of interest to me, which is these two lions kind of eating away at their prey, and that's kind of where the rabbit hole began. And then I found that the specific, you know, story of the Barbary lion, as it became extinct by the very powers who also exalted it as an icon. big part of my practice is a messy studio space, is to be able to like have a safe space to just play and mess around with materials. And so I was kind of just playing and also thinking about bringing it to, to a contemporary audience, and how do I do that? And often I do that through these materials that I find in my domestic space. And also are in many other, people's spaces, and specifically diaspora and people from the global south. And so it becomes something that people can relate to, a contemporary audience can relate to. I've used materials and also tools, right? Like, so not just materials, but the tool in which you are producing the work with, So I had a work called Second Skin, where I essentially used my teeth as a mark-making tool. There are certain histories specific to the global south that are really only passed down orally, and so by focalizing my teeth, I begin to build this landscape by using it as a mark-making technique. So for me, there's no such thing as just the object. The object is politicized through the events and things that have happened to it, or the ways that it's been moved, or the reasons it's been created. And so I'm interested in these colonial objects that exist on our lands today, and in the ways that the body and the vessel of the objects have these similar experiences, how they begin to be treated under colonial rule in very similar ways. So my practice really hones in on the histories, the memories, the aggressions that both the object and the body can experience. To that end, I'm interested in this animate and inanimate objects, the relationship between the two, and the relationship between the personal and the political.